Mining is inherently high risk, with geological uncertainty, hydrogeological challenges, and geomechanical complexities affecting project feasibility, safety, and resource estimation. This discussion focuses on mitigating these risks through advanced modeling, predictive analysis, and operational foresight. Key topics include errors in mineralisation modeling, their impact on resource estimates, and preventative geoscientific strategies. Hydrogeology, a dual asset and liability, is crucial in understanding ore reserve reduction and mine stability. Geomechanical factors also influence deposit viability, emphasizing the need for quantitative ground deformation assessments to minimize operational risks. An expert panel will address these issues, covering ESG risks, Kazakhstan's energy potential, hydrogeology's effect on reserves, and innovative methods for assessing geotechnical risks and financial outcomes. Mitigating mining risks requires collaboration across geology, engineering, and ESG disciplines. By integrating cutting-edge technologies, proactive hydrology, and geomechanical insights, we can convert risks into resilience. Let's create safe, sustainable mining.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the sustainability session number 3 this afternoon on de-risking underground and surface mining. I don't think I can add too much to the introduction that has already been provided in the video there, except my background is as a mining engineer and as someone who routinely reviews with a multidisciplinary team or reserves for sign-off. So I'm extremely reliant on, being a mining engineer, I used to think it was all about the mining to sign off on a reserves estimate, but with more experience I realised that it's everything together. Geotechnical, hydrogeology, ESG, all these things matter, and that's why I get a multidisciplinary team to review all these aspects to modify a reserve and make sure that it is defendable to third-party review. So to get going on the session, I'm very lucky to know most of the people on the panel here through professional and social experiences over many, many years. So looking forward to hearing their presentations, and I'm meeting a couple of new presenters as well. The first one being Alexandra Lehman, who is a Director of Environmental and Social Consulting for the ENSOR Management Consulting Group based in Almaty. I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Alexandra.
Спасибо за введение.
Thank you for your introduction, actually. It was nice to listen such a slogan. Let us make mining more safe and sustainable. Actually, this is what our company is specializing on. Today, at the previous sessions and yesterday, it was largely discussed about regulatory pressure. That we have a lot of things to work on in terms of regulation and legislation. And here I would like to add that on the picture you can clearly see a lot of abbreviation, and some of them may be known to you, some of them not. Maybe some new you will learn about later, but what does it mean for our activities here in Kazakhstan? How to navigate here, and what are the risks for us when we comply or non-compliant with the standards and the requirements established in the standards, and what are the opportunities to use managerial frameworks. On top of standards, there are also diversity of the mining companies. For our purposes, we have identified so-called old mines that have been in operation for more than 30 years. And we call, and also modern mines. These are the mines that have been commissioned during the period of Kazakhstan's independence and also emerging mines that are about to be commissioned, and some of them are still at the stage of geological explorations and pilot stages. So let us consider the ESG context where the mining companies have to operate. Quite obvious that climate change, declining access to water resources, high pressure on ecosystems and biodiversity. This is a thing that many presenters have already mentioned in the previous sessions. All this is a response to all these issues. The government responses in the strengthening of the regulation, budgeting of GNG emissions, and transition to circular and recycled water supply becomes a must, as well as the transition to the BATs and highly sensitive things are significant files. The fines are among the highest if we make a comparison with other Central Asian states. I mean, the fines for violation of the ecological legislation. What is in the social agenda? The country is characterized with a very low unemployment rate. On one hand, it is really good, while on the other hand, all of us feel the lack of specialists, the lack of qualified staff. Among such challenges, we also have to identify very high median salary in the mining sector, which also creates certain liabilities and restrictions both for the investors and also for the managers of the existing enterprises. At the same time, the sector occupies the second place in terms of traumatism, and our residents are characterized with high level of social activism while discussing certain issues and acting against local communities is always a failure. All that results to the increase in the costs for social part of ESG. First of all, the increase of spending for labor safety. And if we're talking about governance, on one hand we have investors and the government, and everyone feels significant expectations from mining sectors and existing enterprises and the ones that only plan the activities. We have to mention that nowadays about 70% of mines are in operation. I mean, the mines that have been constructed or commissioned during Soviet Union period. These facilities are characterized with high accumulated environmental damage while designing the wastewater treatments and waste management established at that time. Maybe for the time they were compliant with the requirements of the time, but now they are obsolete and they cannot stand a very high level of the environmental standards. As for the social sphere, these companies are also operating in a kind of isolated environment. They are characterized that long ago established communities and the infrastructure which is nearby the deported on one hand, they are provided with a workforce, and on the other hand, local communities are significantly dependent upon the mining company. And we also see the cases when the local community are against the closure of a particular mine and accuse the owners of the mine when they want to reach the profitability. The local people have to be fined and they lose salaries. But the culture of safety is still very low. That may be caused not by behavior factors but by the infrastructure. And we can also face such elements as obsolete governance systems or the lack of transparency. If we can judge about based on the survey made in the mass media, and we are aware of these cases in the sector. Now we had a resolution that deprived potential subsoil users with their licenses. Modern mines. On one hand, it seems that they experience less problems at the level of the infrastructure that has been established is more or less adequate to stand the current challenges, but still high expectation of local communities regarding socioeconomic support still preserves, especially it is related to the mines that have been commissioned after Kazakhstan gained its independence. Digital solutions on safety are being implemented, as well as a high rate of automation. But at the same time, after our reviews and research, we came to the conclusion that the local communities still face significant concern about the future workplace due to AI and automations that are capable to substitute human beings. What are the risks that can be faced in the sphere of governance? First of all, management used to rely on informal cases, informal connections, and the failure to fulfill financial commitments, like the failure to allocate funds for social development of the region, for training, for stabilization fund. These are the must requirements, and the failure to comply with these requirements creates a reason for license withdrawal. On one hand, it seems that the mine at the level of preparation is quite at the level of mine preparation, it is quite easy to start complying with these requirements, to establish proper infrastructure, to control the environmental impact, and to establish the relationship with social sphere, with local communities. But also here we can face challenges and problems the investors are facing. And we have also cases when we have significant delays in implementation of the project and the project rejection. But at the same time, the legislation provides us with certain opportunities. So as these different enterprises in terms of the development level, their profitability, their profile, get certain preferences. At the same time, when they invest into the development, modernization, and improvement of their activities as well as the planning. Among such important aspects, we have to note tax preferences and subsidies during the implementation of the projects and renewable energy sources that may feed the minerals mining and green. The taxonomy of green projects also has been adopted, and credit organizations provide loans and preferences subject to comply with established requirements. In the tax sphere, we have the whole set of tax benefits that ensure labor safety and employment for persons with disability. And we have the whole set of tax benefits if you produce the products of a higher processing level, while developing of new deposits. Some preferential regime is also applicable, and there are some economic zones. And process of man-made mineral formation is also accompanied with certain tax preferences.
Introduction of the social project taxonomy is discussed, meaning that there will be a series of activities will be selected, and if you are implementing this kind of socially focused projects, you will get some concessions, and also they're discussing some concessions for mining at the old fields. In general, ESG principles it seems like difficult at the beginning, but it provides you a lot of opportunities, the whole range of opportunities. Here you can see them. First of all, you can take into account your risks at the early stages, including social and physical risks of your activities, of your mine. Also, it is possible for you to enter the internal market of the carbon units. So concessional credits, I mentioned about that. International institutions and intermediaries and IFIs, they are ready to provide you additional financing if you are meeting certain conditions in the area of ESG. You will be protected in terms of the revoking of your license, and also you will be able to participate in different international associations, ratings, regulations. So you will be able to get more favorable conditions for funding of your different initiatives and improving your performance in general. So on this slide, you can see those areas that we believe to be more relevant, again, for different mines profiles that we surveyed, and the opportunities that you can utilize. So because these opportunities are provided due to financial and other regulatory issues. And so all these opportunities are provided in all these three areas of ESG, and you can utilize them to enhance your performance again. There are some success stories. Don't think that all these preferences and concessions are available only on the paper. We already have success stories, good examples when the companies have implemented certain activities, like, for example, installed their own renewables, helping to achieve the national goals and their own goals in terms of performance. At the end, I would like to mention as well that ESG, yes, it's well known. Everyone has heard about that, but the owners of the companies, the managers of these companies, they believe that ESG means more challenges, more problems than opportunities. But please look at it from the other point of view. Look at the advantages of meeting these ESG requirements, ESG principles. If you coherently build your activities in the area with compliance with ESG principles and standards, then it will be easier for you to develop the package of documents for the potential investors. It will be easier for you to join any kind of associations. Because if you build your activity in such a way that you want to implement ESG principles, then you will be advantageous at the market. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexandra. Great job in summarising very nicely the ESG challenges and opportunities through all those different scenarios there. And I highly recommend that project operators, developers take them seriously as early as possible in developing their projects. It will certainly help. Our next presenter is Sergei Sabanov, who is an associate professor for Nazarbayev University, and he will be presenting on risk management for sustainable mining in Kazakhstan. And just a reminder, any questions, we'll have a session at the end also to pose those to the presenters. Thanks. Thanks, Sergei.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your introduction. Добрый день, уважаемые.
Hello, dear friends, colleagues, friends of this forum. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this great event, and I would like to thank you for this honor provided to me to speak in front of you with my presentation at the topic of risk assessment for sustainable mining in Kazakhstan. I would like to highlight the following. Before I start the presentation, our Nazarbayev University has existed for 15 years, and our mining school, we have bachelor's degrees, master degrees, and PhD degrees program, and now we are also will be suggesting microcredit programs consisting of 3 or 4 courses, and in order to, because we would like to engage the specialists that would like to increase their competence. These are professional development courses for those specialists. All these courses can be attended free in the free format. Usually, this is a microcredit program, 3 or 4 courses. You can attend all of them, or you can pick up some of them, and then at the end of the attending of this course, you will be issued a certificate. For example, if the master degree program is 1.52 years. So the last term is for the thesis. In this microcredit program, it will be not such strict deadlines, and you can attend those courses during 3, 4, 5 years. And I think it will be relevant not only for master degree programs but also for PhD programs. And then if you attend all this microcredit program and you attend all these courses, and if you wish to be enrolled into the master degree programs, all these courses will be taken into account. And it's 3 hours per day for each course during 15 weeks. And if we will shift to such a flexible system, then it can be a very short module for 3 weeks or 1-2 weeks, not to overburden our students. You can see the contact details for these microcredit programs. Here we have our student. You can take the leaflets from her, booklets from her, or you can approach me after that and ask more about microcredit programs. Let's talk about the sustainable mining, what types of risks we can face, what is risk management, and conclusions. These are 3 pillars. You know what is sustainable development for mining sector. You know these 3 pillars for the sustainable development. First of all, we are talking about social pillar. These are people. Here we are talking about risks for people, for health, for labor. The mining activity should be equitable for all the communities. If you're talking about the second pillar, environment, then it should be bearable and viable, and it should be economic, viable, and sustainable as well. And for the investors, economic pillar, of course, is at the top, because the investors don't want to lose their money, surely. My former colleague, Chris, mentioned already that he is a mining engineer. I am a mining engineer as well. We worked together, and when we were developing projects, when we were talking about the environment, actually this environment pillar, actually, not considering it, could kill the whole project, actually. So that's why we have to be very cautious in that regard, because in Kazakhstan it's very important, because the mining sector has a great potential for new jobs. And the previous speaker mentioned that. And for example, in our university, we are training in a highly qualified staff. Many of the companies know that. And in SRK company, a consulting company, we have about 10 of our graduates already employed. That's why we need to take into account all these 3 pillars in the mining sector. These are sustainability principles. So what does it mean, sustainability? It means integrated decision making, better research, better focus on the research. It means that here we need to be more engaged with the research institutes, and Nazarbayev University is a research institute at the same time. Community participation is important for sustainability. All the stakeholders should be engaged as well. Also, for sustainability means equity, justice, and also we need to think about the future generations, what kind of resource we will leave for them, and also sustainability, sustainable development doesn't mean that and if you want to have a sustainable business, we need to take into account all these factors. What other sustainability objectives. First of all, we need to promote growth, quality growth. Also, we need another objective is new jobs, food, energy, water, of course, and of course, I will be talking about risks right now, but if we want to achieve these sustainability objectives, we need to manage risks, and that we need to refocus the technologies that will be able to manage risks. What is risk actually? Risk is the exposure. This is the probability of the risk and its consequence. If it occurs. For example, if there is the probability of the rain, but the rain can be heavy rain, this is a consequence, and how we can manage this risk or mitigate the risk. We can either take an umbrella or don't go outside. There can be different types of risks. It can be injuries, environmental risks, financial risks. Of course, financiers, they always take into account financial risks, operational risks, geological ones, exploration risks, property loss is another risk, business interruption, marketing risks, whether the market is stable or not, will you be able to sail at this market or not? For example, the project can be a good one. For example, we are extracting coal, but the market is already so crowded, and will be not be able to sell our product. That's why we need to introduce new marketing strategies. For example, long-term contracts or whatever. Political risks, again, social, technological, or reputational risks, another important risk, because what company is, for example, there is a law, or there are a lot of injuries happening all the time, the labor conditions are not safe, and so on and so forth. So different types of risks. And here, first of all, if you want to manage the risks, you want to identify the risks, then you're analyzing these risks using different methods for that. Then you are assessing these risks, treating these risks, and then you reiterate this, repeat this process by monitoring and reviewing it. And some examples, and just one example. This is the study that we conducted here. Looking at these three pillars, here you can see the risk was of the ventilation. First, the approach of the risk analysis was the following. First of all, ventilation modeling. For example, we are talking about the building that needs good ventilation to have enough oxygen, and we need to remove the CO2 for that. What we need to do for that? First of all, we need to develop the project for this ventilation system and how we can optimize everything. For example, there is a design of this building, of these premises, but when there are a lot of people in this building, inside this building, what we can feel so the excessive CO2, and then we can feel the lack of O2. And how we can optimize that, for example, by installing additional ventilation. In the middle, we are modeling operational risks. For example, we are looking at some of the cases, incidents, how many of them happened, and what is the total impact of all the incidents happened. Here we can use different models and different probability approaches, holistic models. And here on the chart to the left, you can see with the blue column, this is the number of events that can occur, the probability of these events for the certain period of time. And if you can see, I cannot see, but to the right, there is a chart, a diagram identifying different risks related with the ventilation problem. For example, the fan was damaged, where there was an interruption in the power, for example, and then we can have a risk risk of ventilation problem. And here we can use mathematical method, Bernoulli distribution, whether this risk occurs or not. And then if it's about 70%, then this risk can occur, and then we can have this kind of a chart. And then distribution, Monte Carlo distribution. Here we don't have a very a specific result. We have a range where this event can occur.
If we select it here, then we can see how much we can lose. This is a general model, and I did not provide the last schedule that shows the risk of financial losses. It's always interesting to see how it is expressed in finance. And again, it can be, we can use modeling with the environment or certain accidents. We can also see how many with this particular problem of the enterprise. And on top of that, I would like to add what we can do to decrease the risk. We can avoid the risk, or we cannot enter the premises if it is difficult to breathe, or maybe open the window to decrease the impact of those risks. Whatever I mean, so as to allow our brain work better, maybe to feel a little bit fresh. And transfer of risk. How we can transfer this risk to someone else. In this case, we're talking about the insurance. We can get insured, and the enterprise can be also insured if anything happens. But at the end of the day, when you come through the stages, we have to accept the risk. We have to understand that it will be tough, it will be difficult to breathe, that we will be still sitting and listening to the presentations. And in conclusion, I would like to say that yes, efficient risk management for sustainable mining sector in Kazakhstan requires integrated approach which is focused on ecological, technological innovations, environmental assessments, and proactive health and safety management. And it can be adopted to the strategies. In this case, Kazakhstan will be able to progress in this sector. And I think my time is up, and I would finish my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Sergey. And really important topics. One thing around the topic of sustainability, I always like to look at places where mining finished years ago and what's left behind, and just looking at the community's impact on the environment, and very important considerations when you're starting a new mine, thinking about what it's going to look like when the mining finishes, which I guess we can't sustain it forever, but maybe we can find a solution. Thanks, Sergey. Okay, so really interesting topic that I find is coming up next with Roman Bodarenko, Managing Director of CMT Consulting, on how hydrogeology reduces ore reserves. Thanks.
Всем добрый день.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Roman Bondarenko. I'm from CMT Consulting. And in this presentation, I would like to present certain examples and how the hydrogeology condition may impact on the ore reserves. There are several statements about the ore reserves. Our company very often develops projects related to reclassification of mineral resources to ore reserves. And during this reclassification, we use key modifying factors that are established in your code. These are different mining factors, mechanics, hydrogeological factors, ESG factors, that were mentioned previous presentation. In my presentation, we will be talking about hydrogeology factors. I would like to mention that hydrogeology restrictions that we establish in our work on the value of ore resource can be not permanent. They can be excluded from the resources until certain measures are taken. Today we'll consider three main examples. The first one about the transfer of resources to temporary non-active due to the risk of the breakthrough of career waters. And the second is exclusion from the resources due to the risk of the loss of sustainability of the wall of the pit. And the third one, establishment of protection and the loss of the resources due to the risk of flooding of the mine. All these risks have been noticed at all current active enterprise. The first example is a risk related to the breakthrough of open pit waters, and this is quite a known deposit that has been worked at during Soviet period. The processing of open pit has been finished, and then the transfer to underground mine started, and under the water in the block below has been presented, and when our company started assessing the reserve, considering difficult hydrogeological conditions, the open pit has not been drained, that is required by technical conditions. We observed even the increase of volume of water in the open pit lake, and current methods could not help to stop this process, to start drying and draining the area, and we observed the trend of accumulating of water in the open pit lake. So what are the key factors? This is accumulation of the materials at the area that related to the reduced capacity of the wells. As a result, correct appears. Certain recommendations have been developed by our party, which with the time could return the part of the resources to the category of resources. So at the end of the day, at this action from the ore reserves, about 12% from total number of resources have been excluded. And I would like to mention that this risk is comprehensive without consideration of it. Actually, it is a big work which is related to hydrogeology and hydromechanics. On the picture, you see the block of the reserves that exceed, that are outside of the support. In this case, the loss is 10%. The risk is related to the loss of sustainability of the wall of an open pit or its parts. What are the key factors that have been identified? First of all, the open pit penetrated the aquifer. The open pit is deep, and its design capacity is even bigger, and so it was believed that in certain parts quite an abundant aquifer will be opened, but at the same time, while we calculated the sustainability of the walls, this risk was ignored, and then the risk was identified at the edge of hydrogeology and hydromechanics, and the company made a decision that the resources which are in the lower part of the contour of the open pit should be stopped until we implement certain activities. So about 10% are the quite big deposit now where suspended, and they are shown in with red line. The third example is related to the risk of flooding of the open pit, and the second risk is insufficient water supply to the population, as the risk is related to the fact that current open pit is being worked underground, and as the mining is approaching to the aquifer and the water inflow is increasing. You see it in the red, and we have to mention that in 3 to 4 years the water inflow in the open the underground pit increased 10 times, and this trend continues. So from our side we identified this significant risk, and I would repeat that it is a hydrogeology risk, and it should be considered together with mining plan and geotechnical situation, and the calculations have been made to provide the reasons, to provide the basics of protecting blocks, and actually about 20% of the reserves have been included into the protection zone, which is quite a significant number. And in conclusion, I have one slide about hydrogeology that, in our opinions, hydrogeology aspect is one of the most controlled. For instance, geomechanical parameters cannot be changed, and the level of aquifer, the increase of water inflow can be controlled, and we have to focus attention and use it while planning mine operation. In any case, any deposit can be dehydrated. The most important thing is to find the correct engineering solution. You see a couple known deposits that are being processed in difficult hydrogeological conditions. And briefly about CMT services, on this slide this is a key volume of the work that we are doing. I have been talking about the work number 5 is MROR. It is quite of a wide spectrum of services which are provided by our company, and thank you for kind attention.
Thank you very much, Roman. Great topic. As it's just one of the biggest challenges that comes up on projects for us is water. And it's not just about reducing the reserve. You might not have a reserve once you find out how big of a challenge it can be and how much it might cost. So I hope some good questions are brewing for the end of the session that you can tackle Roman with. So our next presenter is Ivan Levinsky, who is General Director, Geotechnics and Hydrological Expert for CMT Consulting, presenting on the influence of geomechanical modifying factors on the reserves of deposits. Thanks, Ivan.
Всем добрый день.
Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to make my presentation. Roman provided the cases from real life, taken from the reality. I will be talking about abstract cases, but I believe you will get something interesting and useful from my presentation. My presentation touches the impact of geomechanical factors on the resources. So I would like to start with a draft of a new Geological code and its update. And I would like to note the following, that the trend towards that the geomechanics starts even more better discovered in Georg. Previously there were 2 words, and now we have 10 words. During 10 years 10 words have been added, but still in SG the volume has increased, and for us it is we are very far from SG, but still we started right slope stability underground.
Это уже радует.
that inspires us. And I would like to provide several examples. Actually, one example. The first thing I would like to do is an abstract thing, an ordinary question which a mining person will ask to geomechanics while assessing the resources. Chris is a mining person. He approaches to me and said, usually it's one word. It sounds like what angle we should use. So we are talking about open pit mining operation. Just to open, if we just write it, so what could be a general angle taken for the optimization in the absence of certain data on geomechanics? For the geomechanical person, it's not trivial task, very simple task to find out what are the rocks and to make a very simple task for geomechanics, calculate the resources rate. It should say sustainability and which sustainable angle can be applied. Maybe you cannot see it well from the picture, but the angle is 44 degrees.
And very often, geomechanics, they are happy coming to the mining engineer with this angle of 44 degrees. And but sometimes many of us forget that when we are talking about the structure of the open pit wall, so it's a specific structure, and we need to design it, and that's why the structure of the wall is very important, and I would like to remind you about that. And okay, it seems like 44 degrees angle is sustainable, but so it's not implementable, it's not feasible. That's why we need to look at it again. Talking about figures, when I was working in SRK together with David Pierce, we made this table and we did these calculations, estimations. This is just an example. Just the idea of this table was the following: how the range of the degree impact every 100 meters of the pit. This is the figures of the in million cubic meters. Mainly we are talking about the barren because we are talking about the wall and the slope of the wall. If we are playing with these figures, we can see that every 100th of the wall, if we are changing the angle from 44 to 38 degrees at the depth of 300 meters, then it will be about $45 million of the saving of the budget. Of course, it's an operational cost for several years, but you can save this money because of this difference in the angle, because we are talking about 100 meters of the wall and the diameter of the pit. This is 45 million altogether. You can save. This will be actually the size of the value of your mistake because of this difference. Some questions. These are some questions, and the geomechanic asked this question from himself. So some of the questions I started to cut out why I choose this profession, for example. But these are the questions when I'm asking myself when I have not enough data, what are the rocks of this massive? Because when we are talking about the structure of the wall, if it's hard or not so hard with rocks, then the approaches to the structure of the wall is different. Then we need to think about how we are going to build, how we will be justifying the angle, the general angle. Maybe very simple question, but the answer is varies very much. How I am going to define the parameters of the wall structure, and how I'm going to assess other factors that can have an impact on the sustainability of the wall, water, seismic seismic conditions, and so on and so forth. And these are potential answers to my questions that I'm asking myself, why I have chosen this profession. C'est la vie. That's the answer to the first question, why I have chosen this profession. Then these questions may be not correct, but what are the rocks, types of the rocks? This is a hard rock, and then because of that, I will be using this approach. So the slope, so part of the wall, the whole wall, and based, I will be choosing this answer because of the similar projects, and also I'm looking at different scenarios because I want to see what happens if I'm playing with the parameters that can have impact on the sustainability. And this is a slide with a nice picture. It's just for your eyesight, but this is so the picture provided by ChatGPT when I asked him to provide MINEX Kazakhstan. This is a picture that I was given by ChatGPT when I asked him to provide the picture for MINEX Kazakhstan. I believe it's quite suitable. It's quite nice picture for our event. Small example. When we don't have geomechanical data, how we can define the angle. First of all, so we define the structure. Of the structure of the part of the walls. We use different methods. We have calculators, and for example, you set in parameters for the benches, and then you can get the estimation of the general angle. This is the first step. That's what we are doing. For example, the second stage, we have to verify this angle. And the first picture I showed you, and this picture, the difference is here you can see that this angle is implementable, is feasible. That's the main idea. That's my message. If we take into account only the stability of the wall, then this angle can be bigger, but it's not feasible. It's not implementable because of the failure of the walls. That's why we need to have the lesser angle, and this is the proper one on this picture. Sometimes there are some, so we know that the angle is always sensitive, but sometimes in some of the deposits, the change of the angle can not impact largely the outcome, because the ore body will be at the angle of 30 degrees. It's not needed to have the open pit wall at the angle of 45 degrees. That's why sensitivity analysis is always useful. It's just to mention for you. And several steps. When we don't have enough data, when we are talking about reserves, so at the PFS or FS stages, so geomechanics ask the questions where. So where is the pit wall? It's an important question because previously we were talking about concepts, typical ones. In general, this is a structure at the pit, at the deposit. But when we are coming to the detailed developments, then geomechanics is asking where exactly you are going to have the pit wall, because depending on the location of the wall, this is real pit, and our recommendation was, in this case, 43 degrees, as you can see on the picture. So the mining specialist built this based on the structural model, but the wall is near the fault, and geomechanics cannot live with these figures. That's why we reconstructed everything, and the green line is the new loop, the new line 10 degrees less than the initial one. And that's because we built this wall at this specific place near the fault. And geomechanics, for geomechanics, the location of the pit, of the wall of the pit, is very important. So what are the conclusions? Though generally, the limiting factor is the general angle, but if you're talking about the hard rock, general factor is not modifying factor, is not a limiting factor. So the transport schematic, so the bench, can limit, the pit bench can limit our angles even more. Second conclusion is either we don't have reliable data, we have to look at different options, and we have to propose not only one solution, basic one, but we have to look at different approaches. Sensitivity analysis for the mining engineers, and to assess the reserves at the level of pre-feasibility and feasibility, we need to ask these specific questions. Where exactly should be the wall? Lastly, if you're talking about JORC and other authorized organizations, we need to ask these questions. So these people should not know the geomechanics, but the competent person should ask all these questions. Nevertheless, I will not read all these questions out. You can read them for yourself. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully you like my presentation.
Thanks, Ivan. I think over my career, dealing with geotechs, they have a common challenge of just working with very little data. And I think Ivan's presentation outlines what the ultimate cost is if they have to build in conservative assumptions based on limited data. The consequences are huge. So certainly, I think one of my geotech colleagues described it as finding a needle in a haystack. That's about the amount of data that a geotech has to work on to make decisions for the whole mine. So look for opportunities to get as much quantity and quality of geotech data to save money, increase your reserves. So the next presenter is Vladimir Los, who is Scientific Director of the Project International Academy of Informatization on the assessment of subsoil for ore minerals based on phase geochemistry. Anyway, I'll let you finish. I've read his profile and he's published many, over 200 papers. So an expert. Thank you.
I have to apologize. My presentation is not related to the topic of this session, and I'm talking about a survey. I will be talking about survey and projections. But let's say that projection is always risk. That's why it's kind of related to the topic of the session. What is the problem? First of all, we have a very low level of productivity when we identifying the deposits. There is almost no survey because whatever is there, whatever deposits are, everything has been discovered already. And for the last decade, we haven't discovered any significant deposits. And by assessment, for example, fragment assessment, by 1,000 of the fields that can be considered as promising ones, only one potential promising for industrial operation. As you can see, the productivity is very low, and we have to recognize that in the new survey situation, when all the surface deposits have been discovered by 95%, 99.5%, it means that we need to utilize other approaches and methods. We have 10 years years of experience in Kazakhstan, Russia, Australia, and it's an interdisciplinary digitalization and mathematics approaches. I will not be talking about setting the task for the projections, but first of all, we have to shift to formal mathematical activities and not just build some geodynamics in our heads. Projections, first of all, formal projections. First of all, the correlation is coding the information. If you do not digital qualitative projections, so characteristics should be correlating. If they are not correlating, we are not getting anything but good out of that. What are the components of the projection assessment of the subsoils? Knowledge, first of all, models, hypotheses about the conditions of the formations, the information about the properties of the geological environment. This is the information that have been utilized, but we need the information about these properties of the geological environment, methods and technologies with the help of which we can transform this knowledge and information into the projections, meaning getting the new information and a new knowledge. And this is the never-ending cycle. In the green light, you can see the methods that we are using for each of these components. I described knowledge component, knowledge element. The basic can be formulated as such. All facilities like deposits of fields and so on and so forth. So these are specific geological formations that are organically suitable for the Earth, and it's also some kind of an accidental combination of the factors. But we don't have to combine the factors. We need to weigh these factors. So the physical aspect in physics, when we don't understand anything, we try to develop hypotheses. Geological aspect, we have to understand the source of the deposit, and very often we put it into the depths, but it's not a correct approach.
I believe that the basic model for ore bodies creation is a model of redistribution of elements on site, because these areas are very close to each other. At the left, you see the general schemes. There is some stabilization area of accumulation. I could provide dozens and dozens examples in different scales from Alaska, from China, from Missouri, Mississippi, from Kazakhstan, from Russia, from Australia, where the areas of accumulation where we have the ore deposits are neighboring with the washout areas. And when we consider the system together, we will get much more information for further forecasting. At the right scheme, you see some clarification in the sphere of mineralisation, and almost all metals become moving, and in accumulation areas they start differentiating, creating the genes of the deposit. That is why the number of the types of the deposits is not huge. We have a lot of different deposits, copper, porphyry, and so on, but the genes are not very numerous. but it is a topic of special configuration. And this is a generalized model of chemical or creating systems as follows. This model repeats at different levels of hierarchy from ore provinces to ore deposit. In blue we have washout zones, in red we have accumulation zones, and also we have the whole other subzones. Actually we get a complete system. Information component of the forecasting. In general, from the base model of ore creating, we see that the easiest fundamental characteristic that we have to base our projection of the ore bodies are geochemical fields, or the fields of concentration of elements and their structure, because the ore deposits is actually increased concentration of macro in the macro volumes. And now I would like to reiterate that just but phase chemistry is important. The mobile forums that started being developed in St. Petersburg and another regions that got assessed by MMI and so on. We are using the phase chemistry starting since 1990s. And they allow us to move towards the prospecting of deep occurring ore bodies or objects which do not appear or manifestate themselves on the surface. This is a picture just for decoration. This is for the first time when we made geochemistry. This is a structure of distribution of mobile forms close to Melbourne. So everything is covered from top with young basalt rocks. And the thickness is somewhere about 50 meters, which cover 200 meters of non-lithified of lake deposits. And then we see shell and sand sedimentation. And there the structures look like this. This is a mapping of a deeper occurring structures, and they look absolutely different on the surface. And here I'll give you an examples of Altai, 24,000 square kilometers, Ryazko-Leninogorsk district. This is a work that has been done in 2005. You see the distribution of zincs as a key core ore-created minerals. And there are the parts which have negative connections that can be successfully used for their projecting. But this is a Western Torga where everything is covered with a loose 50-meter sediments, and geochemical structure does not comply with geological structure. This field of distribution of concentration will give us more information, as if they were correlating, then we'll get anything new, but now we see an absolutely different information, and the structures look absolutely different. And what I'm saying, there are other signs that can be greatly used. So this is Kazakhstan, and you see the distribution of thickness of sandstones, Paleozoic magmatism, with different composition of rocks. And a couple words. This is what usually, what is a targeted characteristic of projected deposit? But what is it? About 20 to 30 years ago, we established a formula. But in the map of Kazakhstan, we see the density of copper, old, and zinc mineralization. We show the level of mineralization and the connections. This made a bit useful. So what did we do when we assessed the thickness of mineralization. You see, the deposits of different metals are not placed one on each other. They are in a distance of 8 kilometers from each other maximum. And this is the location on the map of Kazakhstan. Please pay attention that each of these objects has been described. It is not how it was created, everything is done. But the giant belt that we have seen, North Balkhash or belt, it contains all the elements, copper, polymetals, giant deposit of tungsten, Upper Karate, which is the biggest in the world. The structure is very well seen, but why and how? There is no geological data about it. And this is just an optimal correlation analysis that we use to understand the relation of prognosing targeted characteristics. So I'll not stop with that. I would like to show you that when we deal with the data, we are dealing with constructed models based on this data. And these models can be considered absolutely differently if the volume of information is different. These are the examples when we have little change in the model from 18 to 0.8 correlation. The task becomes turns unresolvable, vicious task to problem to easily resolvable problems. So this is the methods of forecasting. This is a general scheme of our multimodal methods of projecting, and all the operations. The echelon is shown in green and actual is shown in red. This is an example. This is Altai deposit that I have shown it. This is a clusterization and zoning in red. Everything which is in the south this is new identified structural metal zone, and these objects are even big, but the deposit still not considered as commercial. And this is also a Norilsk zone where we identify the zone. So I will not be talking about the criteria. So when it is like the picture, when it is not just a set of prospect areas, but some structures that we cannot explain that somehow are disconnected with geological structures, it's actually good because we get something new. All these procedures, what is natural for them? All the procedures of projection are formalized, they have their own algorithms, and they have mathematical support and software support that have been developed since early 1980s. This is a software complex Elan and its structure. Now it is at commercial level, and this is the main window of the software complex where you can select any functional block. This is a list of softwares included into the complex, and this is the scheme or plan that we have proposed already in 2011. This is a plan that allows to study the projects for all Kazakhstan. It has been already started, but improper executives of this program failed, but I believe it will be restarted. These are proposed methods that we are using within 3 scientific technological programs. These are mathematical and computer modeling of the mechanisms of our objects, generation and placement, development of the methodology of description, models of the forecast of diffuser systems, Sometimes they are poorly differentiated and we cannot see even the borders of these objects. Development of the methodology. So, modeling and optimizing the geological space physically and virtually. Actually, this is a set of information. Physical and mathematical approaches to the resolution of quasi-morphographical tasks and description of interaction of alternations. Even though it has been already included partner and AI based on neural network technologies that has been discussed at the previous sections. The most important thing is to understand where is the specific of the neural networks while projecting geology, and if we adjust them properly, then we'll recognize ourselves, and that's all. So, or if we have to widen set, then we'll recognize a lot, but not clearly. We have to have optimal settings. Maybe that could be a good task for AI and the expected outcomes. The most important thing that we will be able to start to identify latent deposits, the deposits that are not being discovered, not only in Kazakhstan but all over the globe, and this is a global problem. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Also, for me, it's very interesting to establish the relationship between geochemistry and hydrogeology as well, which, on the topic of sustainable mining and impact on ore reserves and costs with water treatment and so on. I think it's good to link all of these disciplines together. So our next presenter is Ivan Biruchev, who's head of geomechanics and hydro department with the Rock and Mill Group, who I'm learning more about on this trip. So I'll leave it to him to talk more around the geotechnical risks impacting a project's finance economics. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you, Chris.
Dear colleagues, I would like to focus my presentation on the assessment approaches to assess geomechanical risks for financial and economic indicators of the project. Because, yes, we are assessing the risks, but so it is over at the design stage. But we need to understand that, finally, the assessment risk should be linked with the financial economic indicators. We can use, we analyzing the risks, and we can analyze the risk locally. So what is risk? This is the probability of the fault, so risk is also probability and consequence of the event, and the risk should take into account to what extent people and assets will be exposed to this risk. And the most simple and effective method is to develop the risk metrics, and so we have the probability and the impact, the consequence of the risk, and we are assessing risks, then putting them into these metrics, and then we can also link it to the financial indicators, and depending on the mine, it can be changed. For example, if you're talking about $2.5 billion, and so the production is more than 600 million, so then it will be the low risk for them. If it's a small pit, then this risk can lead to the bankruptcy. So also we need to have the risk register where we are enlisting all the risks that we can face at our entity. We are describing the source of the hazard. We have to describe the risk factors. So then we have to develop in this risk register. We we have to develop a recommendation how we can mitigate the consequences of these risks, and then we have to assess the efficiency of the measures to reduce the risks. And the risks can be global and local ones. Global risks, these are the consequences that can lead to the termination of the production, and local risks, these are the risks, the consequences of which can have low consequences. So it's minor risks, let's say. The risk-based approach is based, of course, on the following. We are identifying potentially hazardous parts and areas, and the modern software helps us a lot. We understand what is the structure of the wall. We surveyed the deposit. We defined the geotechnical domains. We can look at the other factors. We can take into account all these characteristics of the deposit of the field, and then we are zoning so the whole deposit, and we identify the most risky ones. And also we are assessing the sustainability of the blocks and stability of the walls. One of the example, for example, in 32, so at one of the walls, we have the intrusion, and we have about 67,000 cubic meters, and at this stage we are making the decision what we should do with this intrusion. Do we have to make this wall smoother, or we need to enhance this section of the wall, or we are making the decision that we are just writing off these reserves from our balance sheet. And correspondingly, if we are assessing all the costs, we have our own expenditures, and mining engineers can calculate very well. And in this case, I believe, for example, if you are talking about this deformation, and in this case, I have to take into account the cost for transportation. And we are talking about the haulage of the wage. But in order to assess all these activities, I have to take into account the discount. For example, it's about 670,000 for haulage of all this wage. And when I am assessing all these indicators, the risk, as it was mentioned earlier, the risk of this incident is 30%, and the cost of this is 30 million. When I'm multiplying that, 3 million is the cost of this risk, and by multiplying this, it means that the cost of the wage haulage will be 3 million, if I'm applying discounting, then it will be 230,000, and then the cost for the liquidation of the deformation, I am comparing this cost for the mitigation cost, for example, haulage of the wage. I'm comparing all these figures, and also we have to understand that if the risk of the deformation will occur, I will need this money not now but later on. It means that this money I will put in the future. I don't need this money right now. It depends on the practices of the company. It depends how they are generating their reserves, but it should be at least 30%. we have discussed open production. This is underground production. One of the risks. So this is so the decline from the design parameters of the mine. So the risk is not significant here, but there is a risk of the underground mine, and during the design, this risk is not taken into account. And when we are starting to operate this mine, we are facing these risks actually. For example, we are assessing the cost of this risk, and we are comparing the cost for loading and transportation. For example, here, so we have the incident, and I have to take away, to load and take away that one. And here we're talking about the mistakes in the design. Here maybe there was not proper mining control, blasting activities were arranged not properly, and that's why it can result it can result into the caving, and but the cost of this event, for example, we are talking about 2 kilometers of the ore that we need to remove after the caving, and for example, if there is more than 1 meter of distortion of the mining, so I need to think about the support systems to be installed. These are also the costs, and the costs are increasing, and also the cost for ventilation. If we are increasing the diameter of the mine, the speed of ventilation and the time for the ventilation is increasing, and the cost for that is increasing as well. For example, this is the chart on the top. As you can see, this is the ratio between the diameter and the additional volumes of the removal of the ore. And for example, if it's 20 centimeters, it means that if we are talking about over breakage, totally it can result to 2 cubic meters, and it will be about $40. It means that the cost of mining will be increased $40 per meter, and here we are talking about $110 more. And during the operation, we need to take into account all these costs. This is an example, and during the mining, you can see the red and brown and red color. The volume of the caving is a certain amount of cubic meters, and it means that we need to include additional costs for the haulage of this caving additionally, and we need to take into account and reserve this money in case this occurs. This is one of the examples, and when we are calculating the costs, for me, this is the cost for the mining by years, and I'm comparing it with the OPEXs, and taking into account the discounting, of course, and I'm comparing it to business as usual and the risk mitigation measures, and if the risk occurs, how much it will cost for me. And I'm looking at it, and this is the event. If the event occurs, it means that we need to adjust the passports for the mining. Here we need to include the costs for the trials. We we need to include the cost for the protocols of the blasting, training of the staff for the blasting. These are, here we are assessing the risks of the accessing so the size of the mining, and so here we need to have the fracture for the whole contour of the mine. And at the end, I would like to tell you that besides risks, we have opportunities that we are using, and our software allows us to indicate the areas, and based on the block models, we can calculate the size and of the support systems throughout the mine. If you know the lengths of the sections, we have the passports that were developed depending on the quality of the rock, and we can have the detailed calculations, and we can calculate the materials of the supports and settings. And we are not including the costs like an average support and settings. So we can take into account the exact cost of these materials depending on the parameters of the rock we are dealing with. At the end, if we are talking about the risk assessment, it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just geomechanics, it's mining engineers, economists, financials, and that's why when you're assessing the risks, please outsource it. Allow that to assess the risk to the companies that can do it, because it can cost you a lot if you are not taking into account and assess this risk at the design stage. That's it. Thank you very much.
Presentations when they put costs in there, because if there's CEOs and managers in the audience, they might not understand the technical content, but they're certainly awake when they see the cost of what it might be. So very relevant. Okay. Firstly, big thank you to the translators for my benefit, mostly. And where do we go from here? Questions. We've sort of got some time before ducking out for a coffee. It's up. No time for questions? Oh, there is. It's just my time's up for blabbering on. Any questions from the audience to the presenters? Hands up. While you're thinking about a question or two, I've got a question to Roman. You can probably just use your little microphone there, Roman. Oh, although do you understand?
Yeah, fine. Yes.
The hydrogeological example risks that you presented are huge, and the engineering ways to manage that risk, if there's a problem with water coming into the mine, the risk of a catastrophe from those situations are huge. And in my experience, it's there's only very few people who have the experience to deal with those situations, to manage any sort of water inflows, and how do you stop this, whether it's for safety or the cost of that. And is that an issue? Is a lack of specialized engineers, is that an issue in Kazakhstan as well, with the challenges? Sorry, that wasn't a very efficient question. Hang on.
Thank you for your question. In my opinion, As for the qualification of professionals, we do not have many hydrogeologists who are competent in this work or classification of reserves to resources. Mostly these specialists work in consulting companies. It seems to me that big consulting companies, SRK, CMT, have these competencies that you mentioned. Maybe the design institutes could also have such specialists because they have significant experience. Maybe they use a little bit different approaches, maybe not from the point of view of risks and money at the stage of the design documents. But we often meet in our work the situations when we see that these risks have not been considered as technically or economically. Maybe it is a lack of resources. Yes. If I have responded to your question.
Well, I'm listening to myself here, but I guess from my experience, with the huge challenges with managing these complex hydro situations, there's only a few people. There's limited people around the world who have the experience to actually deal with that. Probably because they were involved in sort of learning from after disasters and things like that. So anyway, that's my experience. But yeah, you just don't want to underestimate the challenge of dealing with water. Are there any other questions popping up? I do have one more. Alexandra, closure costs. Firstly, do you and the company you work for, do you estimate closure and the cost of doing that? And is this an area in Kazakhstan which has a lot of room for improvement because I think all around the world it's a problem that closure costs are underestimated. I mean, there's just so many different factors. I think Alexandra, just by nodding her head, has agreed there. Do you want to add some more? Anything else to say on closure cost estimates? I think your microphone might need to be turned on.
Thank you. Yes, actually, the closure and closure-related costs, as well as the environmental and social impact, is very important problems. Our company really deals with these issues. We have methodologies and methodologies of assessment and methodology of development of the project and assessment, of course, the different stages. In Kazakhstan, I have to say, as Kazakhstan adopted the new subsoil use code and new environmental code, this topic of closure has become very important when the projects are developed. Actually, at this time, the contribution to appropriate closure fund should be calculated, and then this fund should be used after the completion of the operation of the mine, so as to have a budget for closing activities. And these contributions should consider environmental consequences, as social contributions are made during the whole life cycle. And here, unfortunately, we have an aspect that deserves further improvement. As I have already said, in Kazakhstan we had cases when people working at the mine and completely dependent on these particular mining companies, they cannot independently to change their profession. They would need assistance in training, assistance in relocation to other objects. But unfortunately, these costs are not considered in the mining code. But still, we have to think about it.
Excellent. And I guess...
I have one question. К Александре. Можно мне задать?
I have one question to Alexandra. As for the draft of jury code, a lot of things have been added in EG. In your opinion, so what could be the result of it? The increase of the volume of work in consulting on EG, as these issues need to be somehow resolved. It is clear, but the objective is clear: to improve the culture of production all over the globe and change the mindset. To set ESG as the most important aspect, or maybe some other aspects may appear negative or positive in your opinion. In my opinion, actually, geology is meant for people, but not people are meant for geology. And all this sudden turn and transfer to ESG or the green economy, we have to think while we are mining the resources, and we have to think that we are mining them now, but after us, for our generation, we'll have to transfer this planet and resources. And a lot has been discussed on waste recycling. When the technologies have been changed, tailing dumps appeared without any control. So companies never thought about the consequences as these consequences happen. And now the government as a society has to resolve it. Everybody is concerned. Now the question is not to make the situation too worse, but improve the things that can be improved. But actually it is a philosophy-based approach than some particular immediate benefits. This is an approach that allows to get that in the beginning we design the closure. It is very difficult, even mentally, to understand that your work. When someone is prospecting, someone is designing, working technology, it is difficult to feel that you have to close your work and you have to plan your closure. So you have to think about the death of the mining object. Maybe people do not like doing it because of these associations, but still we have to do it.
Responses, Alexandra. There's no short answers or black and white answers, I guess, especially on the ESG side. If there's any more questions, we got a question from.
Okay, so mostly for Roman, one frustration I commonly have for investor due diligence is you receive a competent person report, a feasibility study for the hydrogeology, but if it's for an operating mine, it's many you have. No one goes back to look at this or compare it to the operating data. I think this relates to your talk a little bit. So what solutions do you see to stop this frustration for investors? No. Okay, I'll try and make it simple.
Yeah, who's that question to? I think I got most of it. So you're saying that,
So basically you receive investment due diligence for operating mine, okay? And then you get referred to a feasibility study or a competent person report, which are several years old. This is the hydrogeology information we have. But obviously there's different. You wouldn't do it for mining grade, So how can we stop this happening? And this relates to the risks that Roman talked about. Do you understand?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's two aspects to that. It's one of them is the responsibility of the company management to report on progress, updates on the plan from that feasibility study years ago. Is it changing? Is it still the same? But, I guess ultimately it's the company management that are responsible for updating and undertaking regular, thanks Ivan, regular auditing to confirm that, that's still relevant. But then I guess there's the other side as well, which is government regulators also checking on the company. Are they telling the truth with their commitments? So, there is a whole level of accountability. But I guess there's also a third layer as well, is that if you don't have a defendable, sustainable ESG plan, that's also considered by the investor groups as well that have to, they cannot invest or continue to invest if certain projects are not sort of meeting disclosure, transparency, and that those plans can be defended.
Chris, may I add
Yeah,
a little
go
bit? I think the reconciliation, it's clear, say in joke and so on. Geology, understanding what was planned, what is real. But audits of the annual audits is saying that any other area should be revised and also compare what was planned and what's real. I think it's common.
And actually, that's a really good point. Actually, that's come up on some of our projects as well, where we've actually done the plan and the company is sort of years later is not updating or sort of keeping on top of that plan. So, in my opinion, ultimately these reports have a shelf life. You cannot depend on a report after a certain period of time. So again, I think it comes back to the responsibility of the company and those previous competent persons, qualified persons, to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we haven't seen your project for 3 years. You can't keep using our previous work as a reference. So I think we experienced some of the same challenges there. So it's all about managing that. I think, I think we're finished. Thanks, everyone. Translators, presenters.
Mining is inherently high risk, with geological uncertainty, hydrogeological challenges, and geomechanical complexities affecting project feasibility, safety, and resource estimation. This discussion focuses on mitigating these risks through advanced modeling, predictive analysis, and operational foresight. Key topics include errors in mineralisation modeling, their impact on resource estimates, and preventative geoscientific strategies. Hydrogeology, a dual asset and liability, is crucial in understanding ore reserve reduction and mine stability. Geomechanical factors also influence deposit viability, emphasizing the need for quantitative ground deformation assessments to minimize operational risks. An expert panel will address these issues, covering ESG risks, Kazakhstan's energy potential, hydrogeology's effect on reserves, and innovative methods for assessing geotechnical risks and financial outcomes. Mitigating mining risks requires collaboration across geology, engineering, and ESG disciplines. By integrating cutting-edge technologies, proactive hydrology, and geomechanical insights, we can convert risks into resilience. Let's create safe, sustainable mining.